Good morning, and thank you for attending today's candidate forum. I'm Violet Sheridan, a Prospect High School student, Arlington Heights resident, and member of the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Mount Prospect, Prospect Heights, Elk Grove Village, and Wheeling. We thank the Village of Arlington Heights for allowing us space to host this free candidates forum for the community. Founded in 1920 out of the suffragette movement, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that neither supports, opposes, or recommends candidates for office. The League's purpose is to promote responsibility through the informed and active participation of all citizens. We empower voters and defend democracy. Providing this forum allows citizens to become better informed about the issues facing the community and candidates running for office. We are pleased to offer this service to you. As you can see from your program, we will be holding 2 forums this afternoon. The first forum will be candidates running for the Arlington Heights Village Board, and the second forum will be with candidates running for the Arlington Heights Park District. All of the candidates were contacted by mail, email, and phone prior to today. The candidates have agreed to abide by the ground rules provided by the League of Women Voters. They are as follows. Candidates have drawn numbers to determine speaking order. The moderator will rotate this order during the forum for questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their introductions. Next, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer questions. At the end, each candidate will have a 1-minute closing. League members will act as timers, and they're in the right here, in the black and white. And candidates will be given a 30-second and 15-second warning, so we ask the candidates to quickly complete their thoughts before they see the stop card. Time limits will be enforced out of respect for all of the candidates. Questions will be provided by the audience. Each question will be answered by all candidates, so please, audience, ask questions that pertain to all. Again, we only use questions that can be answered by all of the candidates. League members have index cards available for you to write your questions on, which will be picked up by the volunteers over there. Questions will be reviewed for clarity, appropriateness, and to avoid duplication. Candidates have been asked not to interrupt one another. The moderator will repeat a question if asked, and the candidates are to speak to the audience. Audience, please turn off all electronic devices out of respect for the community and the candidates. The forum will be taped for League use and education for the public. The candidates have agreed to this. Please do not videotape or take photos during the forum. We want to thank Lorelle Communication for taping today's forum. We will post a link to our webpage as soon as it's available. Please hold all applause until the end, and please do not demonstrate in any way to show support or non-support of a candidate. League is dedicated to civil discourse and politics. Please help us with that mission. There is space outside the room for candidates to speak to supporters after the forum, and campaign literature will be available on a table in the lobby. No campaign signs may be posted. And please be respectful of all candidates and attendees. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for today's forums, Ms. Rosemary Heileman of the League of Women Voters, Deerfield.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome to our forum today. I want to remind you that cards are available for you to write your questions on. So the ushers are circulating. Raise your hand if you would like a card, and then raise your hand or pass it down to the end, and then they can raise their hand to turn your question in. Also, one of the main purposes of our forum today is for people who have not made up their minds. So those of you who have come to support your favorite candidate or relative, make sure that there's no murmuring, applause, or any kinds of reaction, because we want to make sure there's enough time for all the questions. So thank you very much, and we'll get started. And excuse my back, but I think this will be nice because the candidates will be able to see me when I ask the questions. Oh, this is 5 candidates for 4 positions. Thank you for asking. All right, we'll start with 2-minute opening statements, and Mr. Schwimbach will begin.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this extremely important event. I've sat out with you on several occasions in order to learn about the candidates and understand what they stand for on issues. Thank you all for coming and for those watching at home today. My name's Tom Schwingbeck. My wife Renee and I raised our 2 sons in Arlington Heights. We moved here 31 years ago because friends told us the village had a great library and was a nice place to live. Boy, was that ever an understatement. Service has always been a big part of my life. From the time I was in Cub Scouts, a Sea Scout while living in India for 3 years, and through the rank of Eagle Scout. I've served my community. It's just part of my nature. When we settled in Arlington Heights, I got involved in our church, coached sports, and continue today as an active leader in a local Boy Scout troop. For the last 2 years, I've been regularly attending village board meetings as well as other commission meetings and events. I was honored to be appointed by Mayor Tom Hayes and the village board to be on the Zoning Board of Appeals, where I've served the last 4 years. The opportunity has given me experiences in reviewing projects with petitioners, analyzing staff comments, listening to neighbors, and balancing all of this in order to make well-thought-out decisions. As a result, I'm current on issues facing our community and village. I have gotten to know village staff and understand the inner workings of the village department. I can hit the ground running on day one. While we currently have a well-informed and capable board, I'm confident that my 30 years of engineering and management experience will give the board an engineering eye and perspective that will enhance those capabilities. I've been preparing myself for your representative since 2014. As I sit here today, it would be a privilege, if elected, to serve all the residents of Arlington Heights as your next trustee. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, 2 minutes, please.
Yes, my name is Lori Taylor, and my husband and I moved here to Arlington Heights in 1987, and we have enjoyed every single moment living here. I live in Northgate, and I've been participating in the Northgate Civic Association since 1995. Since 2011, I have been the president of the Civic Association, and I love doing what I do for the association. It allows me to be able to partake in village business and get to know the village. There are some times that if I go to a village department and I introduce myself, I say, "Hi, I'm Lori Taylor." They roll their eyes. Yes, we've heard of you. I'm glad to be part of this forum over here this Saturday. I'm glad for all the turnout, and I look forward to becoming a village trustee for Arlington Heights and being able to serve each and every one of you with any requests, services, questions you have.
Thank you. Mr. Scaletta, 2 minutes.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for coordinating today's forum. It's very important for us to have an opportunity to reach out to the community in such a broad way because not only will this show on our cable station for the village, it also goes through social media like wildfire. So thank you for this opportunity. My name is John Scaletta, and in the late 90s I was part of a team that built and designed the Arlington Movie Theater in the Arlington Town Square. While building out the theater, I was welcomed by the community of residents and businesses alike. In 2000, I purchased my first home in Arlington Heights, just north of Lutheran Home. I became active in the business community and served on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce for 7 years, and I was the president of the board of directors of the Downtown Business Association for 2 years. In 2001, I was appointed by Mayor Arlene Mulder to my first commission, the Arts Commission. Since then, I've been appointed to serve on 6 other village boards, commissions, and task forces. These volunteer opportunities, combined with my professional experience providing management and consulting services to independent movie theater owners and shopping centers, affords me a unique perspective and the much-needed knowledge to serve as village trustee. I'm a proven leader, and I'm running for village trustee to give back to the community, which has given so much to me and my family. I met my beautiful wife, Tony, in Arlington Heights at the first fundraiser I chaired to raise money for Metropolis Performing Arts Center. We have 2 sons that are active in school, sports, and the community. I ask that when you vote on April 2nd, or even on March 18th, this Monday, that you provide me with your vote in punch number 2 for John Scaletta. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Canty, 2 minutes.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to all of you for coming out, especially my daughter who is busy watching videos in the back of the room. My name is Mary Beth Canty, and I am running for village trustee because as a young female minority of mixed racial background, I feel that I represent an underrepresented portion of our town's demographics. My dad was a Navy pilot for 24 years before retiring when I was in the 4th grade. Both my parents own small businesses, and I have worked since I was 16. I'm the product of public schools from kindergarten through law school. I practiced law, worked in insurance, and now I'm a management consultant focused on program, project, and change management. I've been on the board of the local league and our school PTA, serve on the adult education committee at our church as well as its social justice nonpartisan advocacy group, and I'm a member of the Bridge the Black-White Divide Task Force on Education. We moved to Arlington Heights in 2008, and I have now spent half my adult life here. I know what it's like to start in the village, renting an apartment and buying your first home, to be a working mom in a 2-income household trying to balance a job and commute with 2 kids. I believe I can be a voice for those who don't see themselves reflected in the current makeup of our village board. I am passionate about taking care of our residents, including advocating for earned paid sick leave and upholding our affordable housing requirements. I want to make sure the construction we approve for the village is designed for growth, not the status quo. I believe we need to work to improve our commerce areas to maximize our tax revenues and keep our property taxes in check. We need to be doing more to be leaders in reducing the village's carbon footprint and waste. I'd like to make our board more accessible to our residents to be sure we're capturing their ideas and input early and often. I want a diverse board willing to ask hard questions of itself and those trying to do business with us so we get the best outcome for our residents. I believe I bring a fresh perspective to the board, and that will help us get ready for the future of Arlington Heights. I hope I earn your vote on April 2nd.
Thank you. And Ms. Lebeds, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this candidates forum, and I thank all of you for coming out to join us this morning. I'm Robin Lebetz, and I've lived in Arlington Heights for 41 years. And since 1980, my family and I have lived near the library. At the time, some of the homes were in disrepair and the downtown had not been redeveloped. The village board wanted to rezone the neighborhood for multifamily housing, but the young families who had moved in formed a homeowners association, HANA, and successfully convinced the board to keep the single-family zoning. It was this experience and the start of downtown redevelopment that sparked my interest in civic affairs. I've been active for nearly 30 years, starting with serving as president of my homeowners association. I'm a 30-year member of the League of Women Voters, and I've served as president and voter service chair and on the board of the State League. I've held a number of appointed and elected positions on the Housing Commission, the Library Board, the Downtown Master Plan Task Force, and the Plan Commission. I was appointed to fill Tom Hayes' trustee seat when he was elected mayor in 2013 and ran for a full term in 2015. Now I'm running for re-election. People I've talked to during this campaign tell me they love living here, but they also express concerns about a number of issues, including flooding, aging infrastructure, business growth and retention, parking, and taxes. I share their concerns. I'm not one to shy away from making hard decisions. I study the issues, listen to residents, and weigh the various options. Some decisions are clear-cut and some are not. But because we serve at large, I must make decisions in the best interests of the village as a whole. My many years of service and breadth of experience provide me with the perspective to deal with important issues. With your vote, I can continue to be an asset to the board and to the village. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will begin with the questions, and it'll be Ms. Taylor, and you will have 1 minute to answer the question. And if the stop sign comes up when you're finishing the sentence, you can finish it off if it's only a few words, but not beyond that. So the first one is a general question. What do you consider the most pressing issue in the village, and how would you propose to address it?
Right now, I would say that the most pressing issue at the village level is the flooding. The village now has a comprehensive plan developed by consultants to address the flooding issues, which they will be doing in the southern end, well, the middle to the southern end of the village, starting this spring. I feel that the study that was done by the consultants was well worth the time and well worth the money because it addressed the flooding issues up and down all over the village. As you know, this village is approximately 8 miles long, and it has its pockets.
Thank you. Mr. Scaletta, the most pressing issue and how would you address it?
The most pressing issue facing the village is our aging infrastructure, and we are addressing it. We have developed a plan to mitigate the flooding issues that we've experienced throughout the village. The flooding that we've had has impacted residents inside their homes and also outside their homes. And so this didn't happen overnight, so we're taking a phased approach to remedy the situation, but it is going to take years to tackle and millions of dollars. We've also increased the amount of money that we're spending on our water and sewer infrastructure in replacing the water mains, because we're seeing that those have been breaking down. And we've also increased the amount of money that we're spending on repairing our roads and gutters.
Thank you. Ms. Canty, the most pressing issue and how would you address it?
I agree with John on our aging infrastructure, but I would say that the most pressing issue facing us today is our retail and commerce. We have a vacancy rate of about 30% in our retail spaces throughout the village, and that's a problem because most of our income comes from property taxes and sales tax revenue. If sales tax revenues are down, you can do the math on that yourselves, right? And as people that constantly want to speak about property tax revenues, we need to be looking for ways to find other revenue into the village. I'd like to work with members of our community to find out what they feel is missing from the village so that we can then work with trade groups and the Chamber of Commerce to find out how we can entice businesses to come here and also better support the businesses that already exist in our village.
Thank you. Ms. Labez, the most pressing issue and how you would address it.
Thank you. There are always a number of pressing issues, and it depends on who you talk to. But I would also agree with several of the others that infrastructure and flooding and working on those issues are the most important. And I also say that because that is the number one issue that comes up when we solicit citizen input in the development of the capital improvement program. These are expensive projects, so they must be phased in over time. We are beginning to address these based on the flood study that was conducted a few years ago. We are working on the Cypress detention area. We're doing some major work in the downtown, because these things affect quality of life in the village. Many people find their basements are flooded or their streets are flooded, and these are things they expect their local government to take care of, because if we don't do it, who will? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schwingbeck, 1 minute.
Yeah, I do think we have an aging infrastructure. We do have flooding issues. I think another big one is business development and retention, but I think probably the number one concern we have is we're one big service provider as a community, and as a trustee, we need to make sure that we're still offering the services, public works, police, and fire that our residents have come to expect, and we have to balance the budget and figure out where we're going to get funds so that we can continue to offer those services, because that's why people did move to Arlington Heights in the first place.
Okay, thank you. The next question will start with Mr. Scaletta.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity for a rebuttal?
No, it's just straight.
No rebuttals? Okay.
At the end, you'll have a minute to conclude,
Okay.
and you can include some rebuttal
Thank you.
in that.
I apologize. Keep going.
Time. Thank you for asking. All right, and we are up to you to start with this question. Governor Pritzker has appointed a task force to consider consolidation of downstate police and fire pension plans. What would your position be on this issue?
Well, not knowing enough about the pension plan in downstate Illinois, I would first of all...
I think they mean not Chicago is basically when you talk about downstate, yeah.
Okay. So would include the suburbs here?
It's a theoretical question.
Okay. Well, I think that anybody who is currently enrolled in the pension system expects the level of pension that they signed up for, and I think that if we're going to move forward and improve the pension system so that there's less liability to the residents of the state of Illinois, that we would need to start a new pension system because it wouldn't be fair to those that are already enrolled in the pension system, if I'm understanding your theoretical question correctly. I hear you. I'm just going with you.
That was the first one that came in. Thank you. Ms. Canty, the idea of consolidation of the assets of police and firefighters' pension plans statewide.
So, like John, I am not familiar with this legislation that is being discussed, consolidating plans. I would want to understand what the value would be in that, because I believe that we owe an obligation to people who committed to work for a certain level of compensation, and your pension is part of that compensation. You agreed to take potentially a reduced salary than you might get somewhere else in order to receive this so-called benefit. And so I'd like to see that plan before I can speak to whether or not that would be appropriate to apply in the northwest suburbs.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lebeds, it's a pension plan consolidation of assets.
Thank you. I am aware that Governor Pritzker is exploring this with the downstate pension programs. It's something we'd have to be very careful about. A study was done a few years ago about this actually about consolidation, even prior to Pritzker bringing, he wasn't governor then. And at the time, the consultants that studied it indicated that for pension programs that have less than $10 million in assets, those particular programs may benefit, but over that amount, they may not benefit. So we would have to be very careful. We, as a village, have really put an effort in funding our police and fire pensions, and I can't remember which one's which, but one of them's funded at 78% and the other at 72%, which is a lot more than many other pension programs. Also, our assets are well over $10 million. So although often consolidation sounds like a great idea, we have to be careful that it actually wouldn't be harmful to our pension plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schwinbach, would
you favor there was I had
pension?
read, there was a study done by a company, Marquette Associates. Our funds are well funded. It's the police at 78 and the fires at 72. Our pension funds are large. They're not down in that small number. They're up near the $100 million mark. In talking to staff, they'd like to see it funded about 80%. But downstate, in the state of Illinois, there's well over 600 individual pension funds. There's a huge accrued liability out there, so I would not think it would be wise to consolidate ours with the rest of the state.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, consolidation of pension plans.
Well, I do know, also reading, that there are two tiers of pension liability. Tier 1 prior to 2011 and Tier 2 after 2011. So I guess my first question is, which tier, and it's most likely Tier 2, Governor Pritzker is looking at consolidating? Also, when he says downstate, is downstate everything literally south of Chicago and everything north of Chicago, including McHenry County, part of the Chicago pension? Lots of questions.
Thank you. All right, the next question will start with Ms. Canty, and it has to do with affordable housing. Do you support allowing developers to make a cash payment instead of providing for a minimum number of units for affordable housing in new housing developments?
Affordable housing is a really strong passion of mine. I believe that we need more of it in the village because we need to be able to support multiple demographics. This is a village that has young people wanting to start off here, and it also has an aging community, and we need to be able to keep all of those types of people within the village, and we need to do it in a way that is not segregated. I am not on the surface opposed to a fee in lieu of. My concern comes from statements that I have heard from the Housing Commission that we don't yet have a plan for how we will use the funds that are in the fee in lieu of trust. And so when you have a fund that you are building up and you are negotiating your fee in lieu of without knowing what you are trying to accomplish with it, you are negotiating against yourself and against an unknown. So in that instance, until we know how we're using the funds, I would say we need the units more than we need the money.
Thank you. Ms. Lebeds, you support a cash payment instead of affordable housing units?
Thank you. First of all, affordable housing and having that here in the village is very important to me. The diverse housing stock allows for a diverse community, and this is important whether you're young starting out, whether you're struggling in your middle years, or whether you're a senior. In terms of the cash in lieu of provision of our affordable housing plan, I think we have to negotiate that sort of thing on a case-by-case basis. I'm not completely opposed to using that, but I also agree that we really need more affordable units here in town, and that we need to do what we can to provide for that. About a year ago at a village board meeting, I did say to staff that we really need to start providing more units and not let developers always get away with doing cash in lieu of providing units, because that's getting down to $15,000 per unit, and that's not a lot of money to provide affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Swingbeck, cash payments in lieu of affordable housing units.
Yeah, sitting at our village board meetings the last couple of years, I certainly want to carry on the direction that our board has been going with affordable housing. I think it's important in our village. But I do think that, that we need to sit down with these individual builders on a case-by-case basis and work with them. And I would be in favor of trying to get them to pay the full amount, but definitely sit and negotiate with them. And if it means reducing it a little bit, I would be okay with that.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, cash payments instead of units.
I agree with the cash in lieu of payment. I agree with everything that has been said by all the other people. Yes, we do need more units. And yes, it needs to be done on a case-by-case basis. And maybe what we need to do is take a step up and do more case-by-case bases, or at least put more of an effort to review when projects come up.
Thank you. Mr. Scalata, cash payments or individual units?
All right, great question. I'm supportive of affordable housing. It's a complex question, so 1 minute really isn't sufficient, but I'll tell you everything that I believe. I prefer that the developers actually provide affordable housing and not provide the cash in lieu of, because we don't have a mechanism to do something with the funding that we've taken in. Unfortunately, the problem that we're running into is that the developers are not able to get financing when we're requiring a 15% affordable housing threshold in perpetuity. And so what they're doing is they're trying to negotiate with the village so that they can pay us up front so that they can get the financing from their bank. The other problem we have is that if we don't try and find a way to negotiate with developers and they walk away, then how much affordable housing have we actually added to the village? So I can't say that that I would never accept the cash in lieu of, but we have to really reevaluate affordable housing and what our policies are, because it's important that we have it, but we have to have something that's realistic, because this isn't working and we can't have developers walking away.
Thank you. All right, the next question will begin with Ms. Labadz, and it has to do with development. How would you encourage new businesses to come to Arlington Heights?
Well, there's lots of ways to encourage new businesses, and I know that our planning department, our village staff, works hard at this over the years. They attend, on a kind of a big note, they attend annual shopping center conventions where our village is marketed. And so that's one way. We work with individual developers to encourage businesses. We work with the Chamber of Commerce to encourage that. We have a small business development position that's on the Chamber of Commerce, partly funded by the village, that works with new small businesses to help them navigate the process of establishing their business, because to someone who's really focused on the business as opposed to the process of building it, they need that assistance. I think there are other outreach, and the village would always be interested. You can let trustees know if you hear of something, or if there's something you're interested in that we can pursue. We are in a difficult situation because of our location. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schwingbeck, how would you encourage new businesses?
Well, I've met with our Director of Planning and Community Development. I think it's extremely important to not only maintain the businesses that are here, but also figure out how to grow them, and then once you do, get them to stay here. So I know our director is out at trade shows. He's making out calls. He's talking to businesses. But we have to make it easy for businesses to want to come to Arlington Heights as well. We have to not have walls built up. We have to encourage them to come and make it easy for them to want to set up businesses in our town.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, how would you encourage new businesses?
Well, I work with the Chamber of Commerce an awful lot. I know that the Chamber tries to bring in new businesses all the time. Matter of fact, every other Friday, if I'm not mistaken, they offer a service to all businesses called Value Fridays to come on in if you have a business, talk with other business, find out their success, find out their failures, so that way you don't repeat yourself. I also know that this also is bringing in new businesses is also part of our zoning, because when a new business wants to come into the village, they have to make sure that where the location they're going to go or would like to go to is zoned properly. And that would be the information from the zoning department would be great to go out to all the residents so they know the type of businesses and stuff that are looking to come into their neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scaletta, how would you encourage new businesses?
We need to continue to encourage new businesses to come to the Village of Arlington Heights, and the planning department is always actively looking for small businesses. While I agree it's great that the chamber works on that as well, that's not really their mission. But it is the mission of the planning department, and they do a great job at it, and they need to continue working and finding unique ways to bring new businesses to town. They attend the ICSC meeting, which is the International Shopping Center Convention, in Chicago and in Las Vegas, and that's bared a lot of fruit for us as well. But we need to make sure that we are also trying to encourage successful regional businesses to come to town, because it's not just about the big chains. Amazon has really put a hurt on a lot of our small businesses. We need to really consider doing some unique sales tax sharing agreements. We do have a small business loan program that we have, so that's good for small businesses. And we have a successful word-of-mouth campaign that goes out. And I think that when you hear the stories of other small businesses in town that have been successful, that should be used to our benefit.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Canty, how would you encourage new businesses?
I think it actually starts with the residents, because the people that live here are the people that will be spending their money here. So if we're attracting businesses, we need to make sure they're ones that people in the village actually want to go and visit and spend their money in. I think from there, we have to determine what our brand is as a village. It can be very challenging to go out and attract businesses if you don't know who you are as a village or what you want to be, so therefore you don't know who you are attracting. And lastly, I think that we need to work on our reputation. I've met with several people who have opened successful new businesses in our downtown recently, and our reputation as being challenging or difficult to work with precedes us. I think we need to work on that perception. We have village departments that work extremely hard, but sometimes that word doesn't get out, and it can be very confusing as you're trying to open your own business. So I think we need to improve on that, and that will help us attract the right businesses to the village.
Thank you. All right, we'll back up to the top. Mr. Schwingbeck, we'll start with you on taxes. What are your plans to keep Arlington Heights taxes from increasing too rapidly?
Well, as I mentioned before, the Village of Arlington Heights is a big service provider. So we've got Public Works, Fire, and Police, and about 30% of our budget comes from property taxes. The rest of it comes from sales taxes. So I think as a village board member, we have to look at that spend that we do every year, and we have to continue to provide the services that our village citizens have come to expect while being extremely fiscally responsible and making sure that we're spending our money in the right places for our residents to maintain Arlington Heights as a place where people want to live.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Taylor, what are your plans to keep taxes from increasing too rapidly?
Well, one of the things that I would like to do is to see businesses, to have more businesses over here, because a big portion then of revenue would be the retail sales tax. Every town including Arlington Heights, is finding themselves with their big box stores closing and vacancies rising, and we really need to start looking at the kind of business we could attract and not walk out of town. For example, there's a car dealership that is leaving. They're going over to another town. We're going to lose some substantial sales tax over there. I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring in other businesses that will cover that and be able to keep our budget where it is today.
Thank you. Mr. Scaletta, how would you plan to keep income tax, Arlington Heights taxes from increasing too rapidly?
Well, I think we need to continue to explore all avenues to enhance our sales tax revenue, because that reduces the reliance on real estate taxes. We also need to continue looking at our expenses and going line by line to see whether we can justify the expense, and look for creative ways to reduce our expenses through technology. And we've done that over the years. For example, we've reduced the amount of vehicles that we have that are village-owned, and they now reserve, so the departments now share vehicles by reserving them, just like you would reserve a conference room at a business. So that's been beneficial, and we need to look at creative ways like that. We also have refinanced some of our bonds, which has been beneficial to us, and we need to make sure that at the same time that we continue to take care of our aging infrastructure, because that will support us in the future by not having these emergency repairs and overtime.
Thank you. Ms. Canty, how would you keep Arlington Heights taxes from increasing too rapidly?
I think one of the main things we need to do is look for additional revenue streams, sales tax and otherwise. It's critical that we bring those in so that we are reducing our reliance on the property tax. The village recently agreed to enhance the parking sticker compliance. That will actually generate some additional income to the village. And I think it's important that we look for opportunities like that that are currently existing where maybe we could do a little bit better. But I also think we need to change the conversation about property taxes. And instead of focusing on how high our property taxes are, focus on why we live here and the services that we expect to receive by living here. Those are paid for with our tax dollars. So we can make a list and we can go line by line and say, what are we willing to give up? But I don't think very many of us would be willing to give up a lot of the benefits that come with living in the village.
Thank you. And Ms. Lebeds, how would you keep taxes from increasing too rapidly?
Thank you. Well, one of the things I always like to point out to residents is that the Arlington Heights portion of your property tax bill is about 12.5%. So out of that and other revenue sources is how we fund village government. We do need to concentrate on other revenue sources, including sales taxes. So I urge everyone to shop and eat and do other things here in town to get those sales tax revenue. But some of the things are out of our control, like the telecommunication tax, which is coming down because people are cutting their landlines. The village has done a lot to reduce expenses during the recession. We cut about 10% of the village staff and have not restaffed that much. So the village is, as a service organization, tries to run as lean as possible while at the same time providing the residents with the services that you expect to see, our fire, our police, our emergency medical, our snow removal, public works. All of those are what are funded out of your taxes.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next one we'll start with Ms. Taylor. This has to do with walkability and accessibility. And I'm kind of combining two questions here. Do you support increasing walkability in the village, particularly more pedestrian-focused road designs, and an additional idea of having some audio crosswalk signs for visually impaired persons?
That's a good question. I used to work in another town that did have the audio, and it was actually, even though we can hear, it was actually beneficial because a lot of times you walk around, you're thinking of other things, and you hear that sound from the light, and it catches your attention, and you start crossing the street. I love walking. I love the subdivisions. I live up by Lake Arlington. That walking path is just always filled every night, and it is absolutely wonderful. I'm glad that the village built that in the 80s, and I know that the downtown area, they actually started a program for walkability, and I hope they continue on with that and further expand that to other areas.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Scaletta, do you support more pedestrian-focused road designs, and how do you feel about audible crosswalks?
So I think that making our town having the walkability increase is important. I think that the village has taken a step forward by having our Walk Arlington campaign, but I think that there's always more that we can do. I think that we need to identify the best opportunities to increase the walkability, and I mention that only because to make the crossing at Wilkie and Northwest Highway, to make that pedestrian friendly, and yes, you're now having to engage the railroad, but to redevelop that entire, just the crossing, the lights, everything over there was almost $5 million. So that is, I mean, because you have to get the engineers, and I just want to say that walkability is important, but can be costly in certain situations. So we have to look at the best opportunities. When it comes to the audio portion, I'm supportive of that. We have to look for grants for that, because I can imagine that there's going to be additional costs that would have to be incurred by the village.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Canty, do you support more pedestrian-focused road designs, and how do you feel about those audible crosswalks?
I absolutely support more accessibility for pedestrians and also for bicycle riders, and that would include the audio walkways. I think that by doing more to promote bike riding and walking in the village, we will reduce our parking issues that we hear a lot about in areas around town, reduce our carbon footprint, and also increase foot traffic to our traffic areas. There's the potential for grants to do some really interesting things, particularly around railroad crossings. I've been exploring the idea of building pedestrian and bicycle bridges over main intersections. That's a little bit pie in the sky, but there is definitely more that we can be doing as a village to promote the safety and well-being of our residents as we encourage them to get out and walk throughout the village or ride their bicycles throughout the village.
Thank you. Ms. Lebeds, do you support more pedestrian-focused road design, and how do you feel about the audible crosswalks?
I do support more pedestrian-focused road design because walkability is more than just being able to walk for exercise or leisure in the town through residential areas. Walkability is often something considered in terms of, can you walk to the grocery store? Can you walk to the library? Can you walk to a restaurant? And I have to say, living as close as we do to downtown, we are really spoiled, and we walk to just about everything we can. I walk to the train station. I don't have to drive. Not everybody's that fortunate, but we are working as a village also to increase walkability in the south part of town, where the hoteliers would like to see their guests to be able to walk to things, walk to restaurants or maybe some shopping or services. So I definitely support that. And also, I am supportive of the audio crosswalk signs. I would want to explore what revenue sources would help us provide that, but anything that would help make walking easier for everyone, I think is a good thing.
Thank you. Mr. Schwingbeck, how do you feel about pedestrian-focused road designs and those audio crosswalks?
Yes, I do support certainly a healthy lifestyle and a good, safe, walkable community. And I too would assume that there would be grant money out there for those projects, as well as we would have to take a look at our revenue and see how we could make that happen.
Okay, thank you. We'll start this one with Mr. Scaletta. Environmental issues have been a top concern for some time now. How can Arlington Heights lessen our carbon footprint in meaningful and supportive ways?
Well, as a village, we've worked on this over the years, and I think that we need to continue to do so. One of the ways that we can do that, I think, is really going to be through our recycling program, which has been very successful. But I've seen many, or I've read many articles, and I've also seen some magazine shows where they're talking about how at some point there's not going to be a place for a lot of our recycling to go. And so I've actually reached out to Groot several months ago to talk about, what are the steps that we can take as a village when it comes to our recycling to better educate our residents and possibly through the schools to make sure that the recycling that we're putting out is going and being actually recycled and is not ending up in our landfills. And so that's one of the things that we can do. We can also continue to work with developers to come up with unique ways, because that's really the new part, is that when someone's building from the ground up, let's find environmental ways there, like we did at Mariano's with having the swell underneath their parking lot.
Thank you. Ms. Canty, how can Arlington Heights lessen our carbon footprint?
As I mentioned in the question before, increasing our pedestrian and bicycle accessibility throughout the village will go a long way in improving our carbon footprint. But it also comes down to reducing waste. It's not just a matter of recycling, it's actually moving away from single-use plastics and reducing reliance on styrofoam. I think there's an opportunity for us to partner with some of the school districts in the area to reduce their reliance on styrofoam trays in their lunchrooms, and also to increase our solar panels throughout the village. I'm a member of Our Savior's Lutheran Church, and they recently voted to install 300 solar panels on the roof of just that one building. There's a ton of opportunity here in the village, and we should be looking for ways to do that using grant money or otherwise to try and increase it. I'd also like to see us do more green building, and I think if you go to the police station open house after this forum, you'll notice a really cool use of green building by repurposing the ash trees that we lost through emerald ash borer that they have used throughout the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lebeds, how would you lessen the carbon footprint?
Thank you. If you're talking about specifically what the village can do to lessen the carbon footprint, well, that's something we've already been working on. Buying vehicles that use less, that create fewer emissions, which is an important thing. We also do stormwater control by using brick pavers, such as around the police station. We also can encourage more a reduction in the carbon footprint by zoning matters, and that would allow builders to be able to do solar panels more easily, or maybe wind turbines, or even thermal energy. I know that when I was on the Plan Commission, we did talk about those sorts of changes in the zoning, and so that would make it better for whether you're a single-family resident or a business to reduce your carbon footprint.
Thank you. Mr. Swingback, how to reduce the carbon footprint?
Yeah, a few things we could do, like on the zoning board that I sit on, we've reviewed residential and commercial solar power projects, make it easier for residents and companies to put in solar panels, encourage electric cars. Put in some charging stations at the parking lots. They're relatively inexpensive. A lot of companies will even charge for that, so we can recoup some of our cost. We've had a no idle program in place, encourage walking. When we talk about recycling, Groot came out on recycling and said about 25% of what people put in the recycling bins do end up in our landfills because they're not recyclable. So educate folks, and then look at those other things that I talked about.
Thank you. And Ms. Taylor, how would you lessen the carbon footprint?
I know Arlington Heights has an environmental commission, and I know somebody who used to sit on the board. I'd like to be able to sit down with the environmental commission and get some of their thoughts and their ideas, and also then maybe with technology, sit down or ask people, put out a survey, the residents of Arlington Heights, what do you think that we should be doing? And from there, we can maybe come up with a new plan. I mean, look at the idle free. That to me is a very successful program. Yes, we can get electric cars. As you know, General Motors, I think they said that within the next 10 years, their entire fleet of cars, including Cadillacs, are going to be all electric. So with time and with technology changes, I'm sure that the village can come up and find ways of lessening our carbon footprint.
Thank you. Well, the time has come to have the closing comments. I'm going to ask the league leaders, are you going to be putting out a voter's guide? Yes. You are. I had heard that.
Our Facebook, to our website.
On your website, because there's so many questions here that were very excellent questions that we did not have time to ask, but the candidates will be filling out an answer to a questionnaire that will be posted.
They should have all received it.
Will be posted so that you can get the answers to more of your questions, because there are a lot of issues that we didn't get to today, so thank you for understanding. All right, closing remarks. We'll start in the reverse order. So Ms. Labeds, 1 minute as a closing remark.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the League for hosting this forum and for all of you who joined us this morning. People often ask me if I like being a trustee. It's definitely a big commitment, but I've always been interested in government, and I believe that government can be a positive force, allowing us to do many things better by working together. This is especially true at the local level. What I really believe in is good government, and I'm happy to say that's what we have here in Arlington Heights. Doesn't mean we always agree or that everyone is happy with every issue or every outcome, but to me, good government comes from good people working together for the greatest good, and good government starts with you, the voters. Please vote for thoughtful and experienced leadership gained through many years of service by voting for me, Robin Labetz, on April 2nd or during early voting. Remember, every vote counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Canty, 1 minute sum.
I believe I bring a bold new perspective to the village board, and I'm willing to challenge some of our old assumptions. When I practiced law, I represented developers and general contractors of primarily residential construction, so I'm not afraid of negotiating when we need to negotiate or pushing back when I think we need to do that as well. In my current career, I do a lot of program and project management, so I'm not afraid to hold people accountable. I also focus on change management, and the key piece to that is communication, bringing people along for the journey. That's something that I'd like to do to improve the board, is to increase our transparency and connection with the residents and make us more accessible in a less intimidating way so that your voices can be adequately heard. I also believe that we have a duty to serve our village well. I think the current board has done that, but I believe that I would be a good addition to the board. Please vote for me on April 2nd or through early voting when it starts on Monday.
Thank you. Mr. Scaletta, 1 minute summary.
Thank you to all of you that have joined us today and those of you that are watching at home. I am informed and knowledgeable about our village and all of its issues, and remain so by regularly participating in discussions and efforts to enhance what the Village of Arlington Heights offers. My role as a commissioner on many village commissions prior to being elected to the village board, being a business leader in our community, and managing small businesses affords me a unique perspective in discussions and deliberations at village meetings. I always demonstrate a willingness to truly work for the common good by thinking positively and acting responsibly. I would be honored if you would vote for me on April 2nd or starting on Monday at Village Hall by punching number 2 for John Scaletta.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, 1 minute summary.
As I've mentioned before, I have lived here over 30 years with my family, and I have been doing public service for a couple of decades now. I look forward to being elected as a village trustee, and I hope on April 2nd or before, or even by absentee ballot, that when you go to vote, that a vote will be cast for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Schwingbeck, 1 minute summary.
I would again like to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing and putting on this forum, and thanks to all of you for being here today as well. I've enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you, and I'm also very appreciative to the audience and the participants for your thoughtful and engaging questions. I hope today that I've given you confidence and enough information that shows you why I'm qualified to serve as your next trustee. As a trustee representing the entire village of Arlington Heights, I promise to do what is always in the best interest of Arlington Heights. I will represent you professionally and with integrity. I ask for your vote on April 2nd. My name is a little bit hard to pronounce, but please just remember that with your help, it's just Trustee Tom, and you can make that happen by punching 1 on April 2nd or earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Audience members, we want to thank all of you for coming out to this portion. We're going to have a 10-minute break before the Park District candidates appear. But I also want to thank the candidates for giving up such a big chunk of your life to serve the community. And I think we ought to appreciate them for that. Thank you.